Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan has condemned India's ploy to undermine the Kashmiri people's indigenous struggle for self-determination. In a statement, the Foreign Office rejected the Indian Interior Minister's drone attack remarks as irresponsible and misleading. Islamabad said no amount of New Delhi's falsehoods can divert attention from its serious crimes in the occupied valley. The Pakistan Army says 2 soldiers have been martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists from across the Afghan border in North Waziristan. In a statement, the military's media wing condemned the continuous use of Afghan soil for terrorist activities against Pakistan. It said Islamabad has consistently been asking Afghan authorities to ensure the effective border control on their side. A top U.S. commander says Afghanistan risks sliding into a civil war as American troops withdraw from the country. In a news conference, General Austin Miller accused the Taliban of failing to reduce violence in line with the Doha deal. Meanwhile, the Taliban claim to have captured 2 more districts in Balkh and Kapisa province. Myanmar's military rulers have announced the release of around 2,000 people from jails across the country. State media said the military has also dropped charges against celebrities who took part in anti-coup protests. The military has killed more than 880 civilians and detained more than 5,000 people since it seized power in February. Brazil says it will suspend a $324 million Indian COVID-19 vaccine deal that led to President Jair Bolsonaro being accused of irregularities. The Latin American country has registered nearly 1,900 deaths from the virus and more than 64,000 cases overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 27 people have died and over 900 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.9 million lives and has infected over 181 million people. And in football, England beat Germany 2-0 to reach the quarter-finals of the Euro 2020. Harry Kane and Raheem Sterling struck late goals to guide England to their first knockout victory over Germany since 1966. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan has slammed India's ploy to undermine the indigenous struggle of Kashmiris for self-determination. In a statement, the Foreign Office rejected the Indian Interior Minister's drone attack remarks as irresponsible and misleading. Islamabad said no amount of New Delhi's lies can divert attention from its serious crimes in the occupied valley. It described them as yet another manifestation of a smear campaign against Pakistan that is characteristic of the Indian government. The Foreign Office said the latest allegations confirm Pakistan's stance that the BJP government stages false flag operations to malign Islamabad. Pakistan has called upon India to refrain from its belligerent propaganda campaign. The Pakistan Army says 2 soldiers have been martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists from across the Afghan border in North Waziristan. In a statement, the military's media wing said the terrorists targeted a military post in the Toi area. It said the army troops responded effectively to the fighting. The ISPR also condemned the continuous use of Afghan soil for terrorist activities against Pakistan. It said Islamabad has consistently been asking Afghan authorities to ensure effective border control on their side. A top U.S. commander says Afghanistan risks sliding into a civil war as American troops withdraw from the country. In a news conference, General Austin Miller accused the Taliban of failing to reduce violence in line with the Doha deal.
General Miller also hinted at a resumption of U.S. airstrikes on the Taliban if they do not stop the violence. He also warned of very hard times for Kabul if its leadership fails to unite following the pullout. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the Taliban must credibly return to the peace process. At a press conference, Kirby said a negotiated settlement is the only right future for Afghanistan. Earlier, Germany's defense ministry said it has completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan after almost 2 decades. Meanwhile, the Taliban claimed to have captured 2 more districts in Balkh and Kapisa province, while Kabul says it has killed over 100 Taliban during operations in Maidan Wardak, Kunduz, Herat, Kandahar, and Ghazni.
Moving on to Myanmar, where the military has announced the release of around 2,000 people from jails across the country. The state media said charges against actors and other celebrities who took part in the anti-coup protests will be dropped. In April, the military rulers ordered the release of more than 23,000 prisoners from jails across the country under a New Year amnesty. Since taking power in February, the military has struggled to govern in the face of daily protests and strikes. A rights group says the military has detained over 5,200 people and killed at least 883 civilians. Ethiopia says it is exposed to an attack from outsiders due to conflict in the Tigray region. A government spokesperson says security forces left region's capital Mekelle to prepare for the next threats. The spokesperson said a ceasefire in Tigray was a political decision made for humanitarian reasons. He warned, if required, Ethiopian forces can enter Mekelle in less than 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Tigray People's Liberation Front has termed the ceasefire as a sick joke. A spokesperson for the rebels said Mekelle is under their control. The rebels have pledged to drive out what they called enemies from the region. Earlier, the U.S. warned Ethiopia and Eritrea of strict action if the government ceasefire declaration fails to improve the situation. The Netherlands has accused Russian warplanes of harassing its Navy fleet in the Black Sea. Dutch Defense Ministry says Russian jets flew dangerously close to the vessel, creating an unsafe situation. It said the freight was carrying out a patrol in the area and Russia violated rights to freely use the sea. In a statement, Defense Minister Ank Billoweld termed Moscow's action irresponsible and aggressive. However, Moscow said it scrambled bombers to prevent the ship from entering Russian waters last Thursday. It said the warplanes flew at a safe distance from the vessel and in line with the international regulations. The UN has called on Israeli authorities to put an end to ongoing demolitions of Palestinian properties in occupied East Jerusalem. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres voiced deep concerns over the continued demolitions.
As the Israeli forces start demolishing spree in the Silvan neighborhood, the UN chief called on Tel Aviv to act in line with international human rights laws. The occupying forces injured 16 Palestinians and arrested 3 as they stormed the neighborhood. Meanwhile, overnight, Israeli police stormed the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and arrested 4 Palestinians. Dozens of Palestinian families residing in Old City's neighborhood since 1956 are facing forceful expulsions in favor of Israeli settlers. Earlier, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reaffirmed Ottawa's commitment to the creation of a Palestinian state. Palestinian media says Trudeau also rejected the forceful expulsion of Palestinians in a phone call with President Mahmoud Abbas.
Israel and the United Arab Emirates have signed an agreement for economic and commercial cooperation. Israel's foreign ministry spokesperson said the agreement is the 12th since the two sides forged ties last year. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and his Emirati counterpart Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan signed the deal in Abu Dhabi. The spokesperson said the two sides discussed building on the accords to achieve peace and strengthen security in the region. Earlier, Lapid inaugurated the country's first embassy in the United Arab Emirates. He is due to inaugurate a consulate in Dubai and visit the site of Expo 2020 Dubai, where Israel has built a pavilion. Meanwhile, in a tweet, Lapid also announced that Bahrain has officially designated an ambassador to Tel Aviv. At least 230 people have died in Canada amid an unprecedented heat wave that has smashed temperature records. A majority of the dead were elderly or had underlying health conditions. The Vancouver Police Department alone said it had responded to more than 65 sudden deaths since Monday. The suburb of Burnaby reported at least 34 sudden deaths, and the Surrey area recorded 38. The weather agency says Canada registered its record temperatures of 49.5 degrees Celsius for a third straight day in British Columbia. Canadian Weather Department has issued heat warnings for the provinces of British Columbia and Alberta. The Houthi rebels claim to have killed dozens of Arab coalition troops in Yemen's Marib city. In a tweet, a rebel spokesperson said the group targeted the 3rd Military Zone camp with 2 ballistic missiles. The spokesperson said several mercenaries were also killed in the attack. He denied the reports of targeting civilian areas, saying all operations are in accordance with international law. Earlier, the Yemeni government said Houthis killed 3 civilians and wounded another 10 in a missile attack. Houthis have launched a heavy offensive since February to seize the control of oil-rich Marib. Iran has launched large-scale naval drills in the Caspian Sea. State media said Navy's surface and aerial units, missile launchers and electronic warfare systems are participating in the exercise. It said the exercise will be carried out in an area of approximately 77,000 square kilometers in Iran's coastal waters. The media added offensive and defensive scenarios will be tested to protect territorial waters and maintain transportation lines. It said Iranian Army and Air Defense Forces will provide the security for the training area. Brazil has registered nearly 1,900 deaths from the coronavirus and more than 64,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.9 million lives and has infected more than 181 million people. More in this report.
The highly infectious Delta strain of the virus that first originated in India is causing mayhem as it continues to spread around the world. Fears are growing over major sporting events like Euro 2020 and the upcoming Olympic Games that may act as super spreaders. Meanwhile, tallies show that the world passed the milestone of over 3 billion COVID-19 vaccines administered. Cuba has begun the testing of its Soberana 2 candidate vaccine on children aged 3 to 18 years. Guatemala has asked Russia to return money paid for doses of the Sputnik vaccine because of non-delivery. Brazil has announced to suspend a $324 million Indian vaccine contract that has mired President Jair Bolsonaro in accusations of irregularities.
This matter was discussed and under the guidance of the Office of the Comptroller General of the Union, for convenience and opportunity, we decided to suspend the contract of the HOUTHIS vaccine so that the more in-depth analysis can be carried out, more investigations are carried out. On the other hand, the Ministry of Health will conduct an administrative investigation.
The Royal Society of Canada reported that the country's coronavirus death toll may be twice that of the official tally. Canada has also recommended people with a history of capillary leak syndrome not to be inoculated with AstraZeneca's vaccine. Meanwhile, Australia's New South Wales continues to be the worst hit state in the country's latest outbreak of Delta variant, while officials extend lockdown and social distancing measures to more of the country.
So I just asked New South Wales citizens to please keep following the advice that Dr Chant has given all of us, that Dr Chant provides to me and the government, because that is our assured way of seeing this lockdown end when we'd like it to end, and also our assured way of dealing with this very infectious strain of the COVID-19.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has chastised top officials for failures in anti-epidemic work leading to a great crisis and put safety at risk. In Indonesia, COVID-19 surge is on the edge of a catastrophe as Delta variant dominates transmission and chokes hospitals.
Pakistan has reported 27 more deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide number of fatalities has reached 22,281. The ministry said the virus infected 979 people overnight, taking the positivity rate to 2.3%. The country has reported over 957,000 infections so far, while more than 903,000 have recovered. The ministry says there are over 31,000 active cases in the country, of which nearly 1,900 are critical. Pakistan has administered almost 16 million doses of vaccines to date. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The G20 foreign ministers have called for multilateral cures for global crises like the pandemic and climate emergency. The ministers held their first face-to-face meeting in 2 years in Italy. More in this report.
The one-day summit in the southern Italian city of Matera focused on how to boost sustainable development in Africa. The leaders discussed the measures to improve cooperation and revive the global economy after the pandemic. Italy, which is home to the UN Food and Agriculture agencies, pushed global food security to the forefront.
Conflicts, forced migration, and tensions of all kinds are closely linked to food insecurity, as is, unfortunately, happening in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. For all these reasons, I am particularly proud that today we have all reaffirmed our common commitment against food insecurity by adopting the Matera Declaration on Food Security, Nutrition, and Food Systems.
The foreign ministers in attendance in Matera included the top diplomats of the United States, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and India. China, Brazil, and Australia joined by video link, while Russia and South Korea sent deputy ministers. Addressing the meeting, Chinese State Councillor Wang Yi called for promoting the spirit of partnership. China's top diplomat said that the group of 20 should adhere to a win-win cooperation and oppose zero-sum games and unilateralism.
We need to ensure and stabilize the global production and supply chains and avoid the fragmentation of the international market, the politicization of cooperation mechanisms, and the ideologization of rules and standards. We need to promote structural reform and achieve a recovery of high quality of resilience.
The G20 members account for more than 80% of the world's gross domestic product, 75% of global trade, and 60% of the population of the planet.
UN member states have agreed to a $6 billion peacekeeping budget for 12 missions. Diplomats said the General Assembly Committee decided on the budget for the year through June 30, 2022. The budget will be formally adopted by the 193-member UN General Assembly on Wednesday. The announcement has narrowly averted a possible shutdown of the operations. EU diplomat Thibault Kemely said the disability of members to respect deadlines puts the entire peacekeeping architecture in jeopardy. The US is the largest contributor to the peacekeeping budget, responsible for about 28%, followed by China and Japan. The UN says international tourism arrivals are set to stagnate this year, causing a loss of up to $2.4 trillion. In a report, UN World Tourism Organization says the sector is not expected to rebound fully until 2023. It says COVID-19 vaccination and certificates are key to restoring confidence in foreign tourism. The report reads, in 2020, international arrivals plunged by 73% from pre-pandemic levels in 2019. It says the dive resulted in estimated losses of $2.4 trillion in tourism and related sectors. The World Health Organization has declared China malaria-free after a 70-year effort. In a report, the health body said it is a notable feat for a country that reported 30 million infections annually in the 1940s. Beijing has now gone 4 consecutive years without an indigenous case. UN body's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus congratulated the people of China on the success. China becomes the 40th territory certified malaria-free by the Geneva-based health organization. Russia says it has launched Progress MS-17 freighter spacecraft to send supplies to the International Space Station. The launch was carried out with a Soyuz 2.1A rocket from the Baikonur Space Station in Kazakhstan. The spacecraft reached orbit approximately 9 minutes after the launch. The Progress will dock with a Russian segment of the ISS on July the 2nd, where it will stay until late October. Aboard is more than 1,600 kilograms of supplies and consumables for the 7-person Expedition 65 crew. This is the second launch of a Russian space freighter to the International Space Station this year. A tiger park in Thailand's Phuket is set to open its doors again for overseas tourists. They will be given a green light to travel elsewhere in Thailand after 14 days. More in this report.
The Tiger Kingdom's parks, more than 90% staff has been vaccinated against coronavirus ahead of the arrival of foreign tourists. The park, with more than 50 tigers and cheetahs, used to welcome more than 1,000 visitors a day before the pandemic struck.
We have prepared with many precautionary procedures to create confidence for incoming tourists. We have vaccinated more than 90% of our staff. We received Thailand Safety and Health Administration Plus certificate. We have also practiced a routine to clean all surfaces that can be touched every 30 minutes and will also provide alcohol-based hand sanitizer. We have trained the staff about tourism in the new normal.
The government hopes that the scheme will draw 129,000 visitors to the country in the third quarter. There was an average of 3.3 million monthly arrivals to Thailand in 2019.
I'm happy that finally there will be people visiting the tigers and Phuket city will be bustling again. Incoming tourists will help with the mental health of both the tigers and the staff.
The country lost about $50 billion revenue last year. Foreign arrivals plunged to 6.7 million from a record 39.9 million in 2019. Phuket was particularly hard hit by job losses and business closures due to the coronavirus pandemic.
Another business updates. The European stocks have fallen as inflation concerns worry stakeholders. Investors have taken a backseat amid re-emerging restrictions due to surging Indian Delta variant cases. Italy's FTSE MIB led the losses, tumbling over 1.5%. Frankfurt's DAX and CAC 40 in Paris also dropped nearly 1.5%. The Pan-European Stock 600 and London's FTSE shed more than 1%. Earlier, all Asian stocks traded mixed. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now with the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus.News.